What have we done so far? If I could just move on to the one slide that I'd like to put on there, please. You can see there our performance. For 2011, the fund was up 8.4%. The market was down 4.5%. So to save you any strenuous mental arithmetic, we outperformed the market by 12.9% in the year. The market we take as the MSCI, the Morgan Stanley Capital International Index, which is a global index because we do invest globally. And we've taken it in sterling because we are actually denominated in sterling, and we've taken it with dividends reinvested. So we've taken an absolutely clear comparator with what our accumulation class, which is what we put up there, does. So we outperformed the market by 12.9%. In my experience, very typical of what you might expect from the sort of fund we run in a very bad year. We do our best work when circumstances are quite bad. You may want to know or may not want to know what I think about the future. I'll leave that mainly to your questions later on. But I rather think that in terms of being able to show a good performance in difficult circumstances, there's going to be no lack of opportunity in the years ahead, would be my guess for that one. And you can see that cash basically was up just under 1%. Obviously, interest rates are very low. That's LIBOR. I doubt whether any of us can get LIBOR on our cash. So clearly a reasonably good performance, I hope. But as I'm always cautioning people, a year is not a good period over which to measure investment performance. Just in case anyone's under any misapprehension, a year is the time it takes the Earth to go around the sun. It's got nothing to do with the business cycle. And I think really you need to measure our performance over a much longer period of time with some really good years and some really bad years in the market and in the economy, and see how we do for you over a longer period of time. The only businesses that I think should naturally be measured over a year are agricultural businesses, because they are dominated by the time it takes the Earth to go around the sun. Everything else, it is increasingly irrelevant to look at an annual performance. Nonetheless, ours is pretty good, so we'll ignore that particular aspect of it and say. Since inception, if any of you are in from day one, which obviously we were, we're up 20.7% against the market being up 10.7%. So we've outperformed it about 10%. What can you expect from our fund? Well, as I've already said, I think you can expect us to outperform in a good or bull market. I think you can expect us to underperform a bit in a very strong market. There are lots of things that we won't own that go up when things are very bad, basically. There's a guy who I always quote on this. He's a friend of a friend. He works at a fund called Oppenheimer in New York. And I was invited into their strategy meeting in 1997 or 1998 during the Asian-Russian crisis, when the market was having a very severe wobble. And they had a meeting of all their fund managers, and I was there for some reason to give some advice. And they were going around the table, and the chief investment officer said, "What are you doing with your portfolio as a result of this crisis?" And the first fund manager said, "I'm upgrading the quality." And then they got, well, of course, this became a theme. "What are you doing?" "Well, I'm going for even more quality than he's going for," sort of thing. And I'm going, "What are you doing?" "She's going for even more quality." So this built up until it got to this very laconic gentleman. I'm going to do a southern accent here, so brace yourself for this. It got to him, and he said, "Well, I think you have to consider whether or not these circumstances are going to lead to a real recession or whether it's just a sort of a blip in the market. And I've decided it's the latter, so I'm buying as much rubbish as I can." And he did very well out of it. We're never going to do that. That's not what we do. The analogy I would give you for our fund, if I may, is the Tour de France. As some of you know, I took up cycling in recent years, and my sister gave me a book called A Race for Madmen, which is not about advertising. It's about the Tour de France. And the thing that I was struck, many things I was struck about when I read the book, but one of them was that in 108 years that the race has been run, the Tour de France, there's never been a year in which a rider won the Tour by winning every single stage. And there never will be. There are three distinct types of stages, as you may or may not be aware. There are flat stages where the riders ride in a peloton, where they can get some slipstreaming from each other and be dragged along, and that's typically won by a sprinter. You get the sprinter, someone who's got thighs about as wide as I am, and you drag this person along in your peloton until about 500 yards from the line, then you launch them at the line, they ride like a maniac for 500 yards and win the stage. And that's Mark Cavendish, the chap who won Sports Personality of the Year last year. Then there are flat stages, which are time trials, where the riders are set off every couple of minutes on their own. They're the ones where they wear the sort of spray-on suits and the long helmets and the visors and so on, because they can't get any slipstreaming. You've got to ride fastest on the flat, but you can't get any help at all. No sprinter's going to win that. The sprinter's going to be out of puff after a kilometre or two. And then finally, of course, there are the mountain stages where you get people who have got the sort of build of a twig who can go up the mountain, because, of course, the problem is you're carrying yourself up the mountain. No one can ever win all three types of stages. Nobody has the physique to be able to do that. The person who wins the tour is the person who excels at one of those disciplines and is not too bad at the other two. That's what we aim to be. We aim to excel when things are bad and to be not too bad when things are good. And that's what you can expect from us. Fortunately, people don't often ask what sort of expected return you get on the fund, which is just as well, because the honest answer is I don't know. But if I'm asked and pushed on that, I always give a calculation, which obviously varies over time. And I say, well, we've got about, really the return on the fund should be the dividend yield, roughly, plus or minus the rate of growth in the dividend. Could be minus if the dividends are going to go down. I hope not, obviously. Plus or minus any change in valuation in it. So what's the starting yield? What's the growth in the dividend? What's the change in valuation? Ignoring the change in valuation, if I may, because I think that's the least predictable element, we've got a fund that's yielding about 2.5%. And I think that Julian and I's expectation, Julian runs the fund with me in terms of analysis, is that that should grow as far ahead as we can see at the moment, about 8 to 9% per annum, which means we should be looking at something that's going to give us a return of about 11% or something around there, maybe 12% if we're lucky on that. Now, it won't do it in every calendar year. Remember the Earth going around the sun bit, so it may do it in fits and starts here and there, but that's our kind of expected hopeful rate of return out of our fund. What do we actually do? I mean, because that's all good and proper. How do we actually run this fund? And for those of you who are not in the financial services industry, first of all, congratulations. But choosing something more worthwhile to do in your life. But the other thing to say is, I apologise for what I'm about to say next if you're not in the financial sector, because it sounds blindingly obvious, because it is. But the vast majority of fund managers do not do it. We seek to buy very good companies. And the reason I say that is when I've said that over time to people who are not in financial services, and they say, well, don't all fund managers buy good companies? No, I was a broker for many years. In my experience, they'll buy all kinds of rubbish. They'll buy it because it's going to get better, because it's going to be taken over, because the management's going to change, because the cycle's going to change, because somebody bought them lunch, told them a funny story. We don't do that. Now, there are a few people out there who can make money buying bad companies and getting it right when things change, but frankly, they're a very small minority. And equally frankly, I really don't want to sit there with a bad company while I'm waiting for things to get better. I want something that adds a small, predictable, incremental amount of extra value to what we own every single day of its life, predictably. So we endeavour to buy good companies. Now, I did, in the course of being a broker, encounter a few fund managers who did actually go out and buy good companies. And they'd say, well, there's my portfolio, what do you think? And I go, well, they're all very good companies. They would qualify on what I would call a good company, yes. And they'd say, well, why do you think I keep underperforming? I said, well, it's pretty simple. You overpaid. So the other thing we've got to do is not overpay. We have to have undiscipline about what we're prepared to pay. Even the very best companies have a price that we cannot possibly pay for them. And the reason for that is because the most important thing we're going to do with this fund, other than identifying and buying good companies and not overpaying for them, is, and this is the most difficult part of it, okay, we're going to do nothing. That's the really difficult bit. Once we've found the good company and we've bought it at a good price, we're going to sit on our hands and endeavour not to deal in it. And the reason we do that is several-fold. The main one is every time you deal, you incur costs. You incur commissions. In the UK, you incur stamp duty, and you incur bid-offer spreads. There's Brian Winterflood sitting there. He knows all about bid-offer spreads. he can wax lyrical on bid-offer spreads later for us if you want. And we don't do that for that reason. We also don't do that reason is because there are very, very, very few companies that fit our criteria. And changing one is dangerous, basically. Finding another one is incredibly difficult. There are lots of parts of the market that we simply will not own. It means that we have a limited number of things that we have to think about. That's good, because actually there's a limited number of things we're capable of thinking about. The good news is at least we've managed to identify that, whereas a lot of people haven't managed to figure out that they're capable of thinking about very few things at once. We'll never own a bank. We'll never own an insurance company. We'll never own a real estate company. We won't own anything that's heavily cyclical, like engineering or chemicals or steel, for example. We won't own any utilities. We won't own any resources. And the one thing we will never, ever own, no matter whatever happens, is an airline. Our esteemed chairman is in fact on the board of an airline. We regard this as very amusing. We won't own technology. We don't understand technology. We don't profess to. And technology frightens us. Technology frightens us because it can change rapidly, and we may not spot the change. Neither may anybody else, frankly, but that doesn't seem to bother them. They invest in technology. What we like is really old-line technology, stuff that doesn't change much. We like investing in elevator companies. Mr. Otis patented the safety elevator in about 1850. It hasn't changed since. It's the same design. We like investing in shaving businesses. Mr. Gillette patented the safety razor in about 1908. It hasn't changed significantly. If any of you go to India, you'll find that the safety razor, the original one where you twiddle the shaft and the jaws open, you drop a blade in, is still Gillette's biggest selling product in India. That's the sort of technology we like. When we're describing it, we come down to describe it by the words small ticket, consumer, non-durable. Small ticket, things that we all buy, and we buy them by doing this. It's not a life-changing experience. We don't need to raise a mortgage or use a credit card. Just take one of these out and buy it. You don't think about it very much, just go and buy it. Small ticket, consumer, it's sold to us, the consumer. We don't like things on the whole that are sold to other companies if we can avoid them. Why? Companies employ terrible people called purchasing managers. Purchasing managers' job is to negotiate on price, then to negotiate on payment terms, then to find a reason to renege and come back and get another discount. Any of you dealt with them all or have been purchasing managers will know. You, the consumer, have no opportunity to negotiate on price. If you think you do, next time you go in and you're buying your cosmetics or your deodorants and toiletries or your household cleaning products or your snacks, have a go at negotiating on price. Let us know how you get on. I think you'll come out empty-handed. So small ticket consumer, non-durables. We don't like companies that make durable items. If you've got a durable item like a car and you're feeling a bit hard up, just have it serviced. It will be here next year, probably. Whereas with the things that we buy, once you've consumed it, you want some more, you have to go buy some more. So we're looking at companies that basically do our everyday necessities and luxuries. People who, if you ask us to define a single characteristic of these companies, they make their money out of a large number of everyday predictable events, basically.